Dr. Elliot Marks groaned as his head throbbed, the dim glow of emergency lights flickering inside the mangled cockpit of his ship. Sparks fizzled, and his AI assistant, Sassy, chirped in her usual snarky tone. Congratulations, Elliot. You've officially crash-landed us on a planet we weren't even supposed to visit. Do you want a gold star or a survival plan? Elliot unbuckled his harness, stumbling over twisted metal and debris. Sassy status report. Ship integrity, Swiss cheese. Communication array, toast. Emergency rations, 1 granola bar and a questionable protein shake. Estimated survival time, hilariously short. He groaned, rubbing his temples. Great. Stranded on a planet with nothing but my wits and your charming personality. The hatch hissed open, revealing a jungle bathed in bioluminescent hues. Towering trees glowed with soft blues and purples, and insect-like creatures flitted through the mist. It was beautiful, and utterly terrifying. Well, I guess I'd better find help. Or something edible, Elliot muttered. Sassy beeped. If they don't eat you first. Elliot stepped onto the soft ground, the air thick with sweet, unfamiliar scents. His boots squished into moss, and every step made the local fauna chirp or chitter. He moved cautiously, scanning with his handheld bioscanner. Let's not die today, he whispered, pushing aside a fern with leaves the size of his torso. He didn't see the net until it snapped tight around him, hoisting him off the ground. Elliot yelped, limbs tangled as his datapad slipped from his grip and landed with a dull thud below. Well, this is just perfect, he muttered, swaying in the breeze. Voices, deep, rumbling, and unmistakably alien, echoed through the trees. His heart pounded as massive figures emerged, silhouetted against the glowing flora. Hello? He called out. I come in peace. One of the figures approached, and as they stepped into view, Elliot's jaw dropped. 12 feet tall, with sleek emerald skin, the alien had a regal bearing, draped in flowing silver garments. Horn-like ridges adorned her head, framing sharp, amber eyes that scrutinized him. She spoke in a melodious but commanding voice, and a device on her collar translated. A human? In my domain? Elliot forced a smile. Hi. Yes, human. Very harmless. Just passing through, well, crashing through, technically. The alien blinked, then turned to her entourage. They were equally massive, their armor polished and weapons pointedly sharp. Bring him to the Empress, she ordered, and before Elliot could protest, the net tightened, and he was carted off like a catch of the day. His captors marched through winding paths, past crystalline rivers and spire-like structures carved into the landscape. It was a city, bustling with creatures that gawked at the bound human. He tried not to notice how many of them licked their lips as he passed. When they reached an ornate hall, Elliot was deposited unceremoniously at the foot of a grand throne. He scrambled to his knees, eyes widening at the sight before him. The Empress was even more striking than her warriors. Her robes shimmered with iridescent patterns, and a crown of woven metals rested against her forehead. She leaned forward, her expression curious. A human male, the Empress said, her voice purring through the translator. How delicate. Elliot chuckled nervously. I'd prefer resilient, but delicate works too. Hi, I'm Elliot. Just a xenobiologist trying not to become a xenobiology specimen. Her lips curved into what he hoped was a smile. You fell from the sky. A gift, perhaps? More like a shipping error, he quipped, earning a ripple of confusion from the surrounding aliens. The Empress rose, her height even more intimidating up close. We have not seen a human in many cycles. Tell me, Elliot, do your kind always arrive in such a dramatic fashion? Only when we're trying to make an impression, he said, trying to match her energy. I promise I'm usually more grounded. Her expression shifted, an unreadable blend of amusement and calculation. We shall see. Guards, prepare him for the welcoming feast. Elliot's eyes widened. Feast? Oh, great. Love a good meal. As a guest, right? Not the main course? The Empress laughed, a deep, resonant sound that vibrated through the hall. You amuse me, little human. No, you are not food. You are a curiosity. He exhaled, relief washing over him. Curiosity I can handle. As long as no one tries to handle me too roughly. Her brows lifted, the translator hesitating over his joke. We shall see how durable you truly are, she said, her words a tantalizing blend of promise and threat. Elliot gulped, his mind racing. If he wanted to survive, he'd need to stay sharp. And possibly keep his mouth shut, though that had never been his strong suit. As he was escorted to his quarters, Elliot glanced at Sassy's tiny display on his wrist device. Sassy, any ideas? Yes, she replied. Don't die. And maybe stop flirting with the Empress. She could break you in half. Elliot managed a smirk. You say that like it's a bad thing. Sassy sighed. This is going to be a long survival mission, isn't it? Elliot straightened his rumpled shirt and prepared to meet whatever bizarre, possibly dangerous customs lay ahead. If he played his cards right, maybe he could turn his crash landing into a soft landing. And if not? Well, he always did enjoy an adventure, preferably one where he didn't end up on a spit. Elliot stood in front of an ornate mirror, adjusting the flowing robe the Tarthani had provided. It was a shimmering garment, far too large and adorned with beads that jingled every time he moved. He felt like a toddler playing dress-up in a curtain. Is this really necessary? He muttered to Sassy, her voice a soft hum in his ear. According to their customs, yes. You're being presented to the court as a guest of honor. Or possibly as livestock. My translation matrix is only 80% confident. Great. Let's hope I'm not the catch of the day special. The doors to his quarters slid open, and 2 towering guards gestured for him to follow. He swallowed his nerves and adopted what he hoped was a confident stride, which probably just looked like he needed a bathroom. The grand hall was filled with aliens of every shape and size. The Tarthani were predominant, their emerald skin and towering forms giving the room a unified, intimidating presence. But mixed among them were traders and diplomats from other species, feathered, scaled, and chitinous beings, all sipping from crystalline goblets and exchanging low, rumbling chatter. As he was led toward the Empress, Elliot caught snippets of conversation. Such a small creature. Is he fully grown? I hear humans are quite flexible. He bit his lip, cheeks burning. Sassy's voice chimed in. You're quite popular. Should I start taking reservations? Not helping, he hissed back. Empress Zellara stood at the center of a raised platform, a goblet in her hand. She wore a new set of robes, more intricate than before, with patterns that shifted in the light. When she saw him, a slow smile spread across her lips. Honored guests, she announced, her voice amplified by unseen technology. Today, we celebrate the arrival of a visitor from the distant world of Earth. A human, both fragile and fascinating. Elliot forced a smile, and raised his hand in a small wave. The crowd's response was mixed, some murmurs of intrigue, a few chuckles, and at least one unmistakable growl. The Empress extended a hand toward him, and the guards nudged him forward. He stepped onto the platform, feeling the weight of every gaze in the room. Tell us, Elliot, the Empress continued. What gifts do you bring from your world? He hesitated, then patted his robe, finding only the data pad strapped to his side. Well, I didn't exactly pack for a party. But I do have information. Knowledge about biology, technology, and, human culture. She tilted her head. Culture? Do you mean art, music, stories? Sure. And traditions. Like, Netflix and chill. The translator paused, and the room fell silent. The Empress's eyes narrowed slightly. Netflix and chill? She repeated, the words distorted through the translation. Elliot's stomach dropped. Oh, no. It's just a human phrase. It means relaxing. Watching stories and being cozy. The Empress considered this. Humans invite each other to share stories in their bedding chambers? Sometimes, he squeaked. But not always. It's more like entertainment. Like your feast here, but with fewer appetizers and more blankets. A ripple of amusement spread through the crowd, though some faces remained puzzled. Then let us honor our guests with entertainment, the Empress declared. She clapped her hands, and a group of performers took the stage, acrobats whose limbs moved in ways that defied anatomy, and musicians whose instruments produced sounds somewhere between wind chimes and whale songs. Elliot exhaled, relieved to have dodged that particular conversational landmine. A servant approached, offering him a goblet filled with a pale, iridescent liquid. He sniffed it cautiously. "It's not poison," the servant assured him, though their grin showed far too many teeth. "Not super reassuring," he muttered, but took a small sip anyway. The drink was sweet and slightly fizzy, and warmth spread through him. As the performances continued, the Empress leaned closer to him. "Do humans often share drinks during their cultural exchanges?" He nearly choked. Yes. Usually with friends. Or, potential partners." Her amber eyes sparkled. "Then you consider me a potential partner?" Elliot's mind raced. "I meant diplomatic partners. Like trade. Or, research. Cultural exchange." "Cultural exchange," she echoed, the phrase rolling off her tongue. "I see. Tell me more about these human customs." His brain scrambled for safe topics. "Well, we have a tradition called coffee breaks. It's when we take a moment to relax, usually with a hot beverage. It's about recharging, sharing stories, sometimes even solving problems." The Empress considered this. "A ritual of bonding and restoration. Fascinating. We must try this coffee break together." Elliot forced a grin. "Sure. Though, coffee might be hard to find here." "We have many brews," she replied smoothly. "Some of them quite potent. I'm sure we can find something that invigorates you." He shifted uncomfortably, the double meaning not lost on him. "Great. I'm always up for a little invigoration." The Empress's laughter was soft and surprisingly genuine. "You are an enigma, Elliot Marks. Small but clever. Gentle yet bold. I believe our people could learn much from you." He relaxed just a bit. "And I'd love to learn more about your world. From a scientific perspective, of course." Her lips curved. "Of course." The feast continued, with dishes that ranged from recognizable fruits to wriggling, gelatinous masses he politely declined. He managed to engage with the guests, sharing harmless stories that the translator often twisted into bizarre interpretations. When a warrior asked about human mating dances, Elliot demonstrated a bit of the robot, which led to an impromptu dance-off with a six-legged alien who took the challenge far too seriously. By the end of the evening, Elliot was exhausted but still in one piece. As he was led back to his quarters, the Empress offered him a final parting smile. "Rest well, Elliot. Tomorrow, we shall continue our cultural exchange." He managed a nod, his brain buzzing with a mix of relief and anxiety. When the doors closed behind him, he sank into the surprisingly soft bedding, staring at the alien stars through the translucent ceiling. "Sassy," he whispered. "What are the odds I can get through this without accidentally proposing to someone?" "Low," she replied. "But at least it won't be boring." He closed his eyes, letting exhaustion pull him under. Whatever tomorrow held, he knew he'd need all his wits, and maybe a little luck, to survive it. Elliot awoke to the sound of soft chimes and the scent of something sweet and floral. His eyelids fluttered open, and he found himself wrapped in silky sheets that felt like a cross between satin and living moss. For a brief, blissful moment, he almost forgot he was stranded on an alien planet. Then the door slid open, and a Tarthani attendant stepped inside, their emerald skin gleaming in the morning light. "The Empress summons you, human." Elliot sat up, his hair a wild mess. "Sure, just give me a minute to look less like I got dragged through a hedge." The attendant blinked, uncomprehending, but handed him another ornate robe, this one deep blue with silver accents. As Elliot dressed, Sassy's voice hummed in his ear. "Just so you know, you've been scheduled for the ritual of compatibility." I'm not sure if that's as ominous as it sounds, but I'd brace yourself. Compatibility? Like for diplomacy, right? Uh-huh. Keep telling yourself that. Elliot groaned, tugging at the oversized sleeves. I swear, if this ends with me in a gladiator pit or a wedding ceremony, I'm blaming you. The Empress awaited him in a sunlit courtyard, surrounded by pillars that twisted like living vines. She wore a gown of interwoven petals, and as Elliot approached, she offered him a serene smile. Good morning, Elliot. Did you rest well? Like a baby, he replied. You know, if babies were terrified of being mistaken for a canopy. Her laughter was a soft rumble. You remain amusing. It is a rare gift. He grinned, the knot of anxiety loosening. So, what's on the agenda? More cultural exchange? Indeed, she said. Today, you shall participate in our ritual of compatibility. It is an ancient tradition, where potential partners demonstrate their synergy through a series of challenges. Challenges, he repeated. You mean like board games? Trivia? The Empress's expression remained calm, but her eyes glittered with mischief. Something like that. It is important to test your wit, your strength, and your endurance. Elliot swallowed hard. Right. Endurance. I'm definitely more of a brains over brawn kind of guy, but hey, I'm flexible. She raised an eyebrow. Is that so? Then you should do well. He was guided to an arena where the assembled Tarthani nobility sat in a semicircle, observing with interest. To his dismay, Gork, the brutish rival suitor, stood at the opposite end of the field, cracking his knuckles with the sound of rocks grinding together. Elliot offered a weak wave. Hey, Gork. Long time, no see. Gork snarled. You will not steal my place, human. I shall prove my worth to the Empress. Elliot leaned toward the Empress. You know, I'm not really into competition. Maybe we could settle this over a nice chat? She shook her head, her smile polite but unyielding. Tradition must be honored. Do not fear, Elliot. The trials are not meant to harm, only to reveal truth. The first trial was announced. The test of gentle touch. Elliot's mind spun with possibilities, none of them good. His fears were unfounded, however, as attendants brought forward small, furry creatures that resembled a mix between a kitten and a jellyfish. Their instructions were simple: keep the creature calm and comfortable. Gork, all muscle and no finesse, struggled as the creature squirmed in his massive hands. Meanwhile, Elliot cradled his creature gently, whispering nonsense words and giving it a soft rub behind its translucent ear flaps. The creature purred, or at least emitted a soothing hum, and the crowd murmured with approval. One of the Tarthani judges nodded. The human demonstrates tenderness. The second trial. The trial of balance. Elliot and Gork were both handed long poles and instructed to navigate a narrow beam suspended over a shallow pool filled with shimmering, viscous liquid. Gork charged forward, relying on brute strength. The beam wobbled, and he fell with a splash, the liquid clinging to him with a wet slurp. The crowd chuckled. Elliot took a different approach. He crouched low, moved slowly, and used the pole to counterbalance each step. When he reached the end, he couldn't help but add a little bow, earning another round of surprised applause. Gork pulled himself out of the pool, the alien goo sticking to his skin like honey. He shot Elliot a murderous glare, but Elliot just shrugged. It's all about finesse, big guy. The final trial was announced. The challenge of communication. A table was brought forward, laden with objects, some familiar, others utterly baffling. The goal was to describe the purpose of each item without using direct language, allowing the other participant to guess correctly. Elliot's opponent was not Gork but the Empress herself. The crowd leaned in, anticipating the exchange. Elliot picked up a spiraled object that resembled a conch shell but hummed softly. This, he said, is like a whispering stone. You hold it close, and it sings secrets only for you. The Empress touched it to her ear, and a small smile crept over her lips. A communication device. Very clever. She picked up an item, a sphere with holes along its surface. This is a vessel that catches the breath of the wind and turns it into music. A wind chime, Elliot guessed, and she nodded approvingly. The exchange continued, each answer building rapport. They spoke in metaphors, playful and teasing, and the room filled with an undercurrent of laughter and soft murmurs. When the challenge concluded, the Empress stepped forward, taking Elliot's hands in hers. Her skin was cool and smooth, her grip surprisingly gentle. "You have shown intellect, patience, and humor," she said, her voice carrying through the hall. "You have passed our tests not through force but through wisdom. I declare you, Elliot Marks, a worthy partner." The crowd erupted in applause. Gork, now mostly free of the goo, stormed away, muttering curses under his breath. Elliot smiled, a genuine warmth spreading through him. "Thank you, Empress. I'd be honored to, partner with you. In the diplomatic sense, of course." Her fingers tightened around his. "Of course. For now." The subtle promise in her tone sent a shiver down his spine, part excitement, part sheer terror. But as the crowd began to disperse, and the Empress led him toward the private gardens, Elliot couldn't help but feel a surge of confidence. He might be small, squishy, and hopelessly human, but if he could survive this, he could survive anything. And maybe, just maybe, he'd find a way home. Or at least, find a way to make this strange, beautiful world feel a little more like home. Elliot sat on a cushion of woven petals, his knees drawn up as he watched the alien sunset. The sky shifted through colors unknown to human eyes, and the air hummed with distant, melodic chimes. The Empress had left him here to reflect, a word that carried layers of meaning he wasn't entirely sure about. Sassy's voice whispered in his ear, "I'm detecting elevated heart rate and cortisol levels. Are you nervous, or is that just the alien cuisine working through your system?" "Both," he muttered. "Any chance you've found a way to repair the ship or call for help? Unless you've discovered a stash of Earth-grade parts and a long-range transmitter, no. But hey, you've survived worse. Like that blind date on Ganymede. That wasn't survival. That was an escape mission." Before Sassy could retort, the garden door slid open, and Empress Zellara approached, her silhouette regal against the fading light. She moved with a grace that made Elliot feel even smaller, and yet, when she sat beside him, she folded her long limbs in a way that seemed almost casual. "You seem troubled," she said softly. "Is our world not to your liking?" "It's beautiful," he replied. "It's just not mine." Her expression remained calm, but there was a hint of something beneath, concern, perhaps. "You miss your home." "I do. My people, my normalcy. Though I'm not sure I've ever been good at normal." She chuckled, a sound like distant thunder. "You are not like others I have met. You see the world through questions, not assumptions. It is a rare and valuable trait. Yeah, but sometimes it just gets me into trouble. Like crash landing on an alien planet and almost becoming part of a weird compatibility ritual." Her lips curved. "You fared well. The court was impressed. I was impressed." "Really?" He couldn't help but grin. "Because I kind of thought I was just winging it. Perhaps that is what makes you remarkable. You adapt. You find paths where others see walls." He leaned back, his fingers threading through the soft grass. "I guess that's what humans do. We're scrappy. We survive." She tilted her head. "And yet you fear this place." "Not fear. Just uncertainty. I'm not sure where I fit in." Her gaze held his, steady and unblinking. "You fit here if you choose to. You could have a place among us. Not as a captive, but as an ally. A guide to new possibilities." His heart thumped in his chest. "Are you offering me a job or something else?" Her hand, cool and strong, settled over his. "Why not both?" He swallowed, his mind racing. "You know, humans usually take things a bit slower. We have this whole thing called dating. It's like a series of trials, but with less goo and more awkward small talk." The Empress laughed, and the sound drew curious glances from the distant guards. "Then perhaps we shall date, as humans do." I am nothing if not a student of new experiences. Elliot's cheeks warmed. I'd like that. As long as there's no risk of me being accidentally married to a rival warlord or, eaten. I can make no promises. She teased, and he chuckled despite himself. A chime interrupted them, and one of her advisors approached, bowing low. Empress, there is a matter requiring your attention. The envoys from the Ralix Consortium have arrived. Her demeanor shifted instantly, still warm, but now edged with authority. Of course. Prepare the hall. I shall attend shortly. The advisor retreated, and she turned back to Elliot. Diplomacy calls. Will you join me? Sure, as long as I don't have to negotiate anything involving gladiator combat or strange beverages. You shall stand at my side, she promised. Your presence alone will be enough. The hall was already bustling when they arrived, and Elliot felt the weight of hundreds of eyes. The Ralix envoys were wiry creatures, their skin translucent and their eyes too large. They moved in rippling waves, and when they spoke, their voices layered over one another like echoes. Elliot stayed quiet, observing as the Empress engaged in negotiation. The Ralix wanted access to resources on Xylar Prime, minerals, technology, and, disturbingly, biological samples. The Empress held firm, her tone measured but unyielding. Our world is not a marketplace. We are open to trade, but not at the cost of our sovereignty. One of the envoys hissed. And what of the human? Is he not a prize, a bargaining chip? Elliot bristled, but the Empress's hand brushed against his, a calming gesture. Elliot Marks is not a prize to be traded. He is an honored guest and a valued ally. Any deal that does not respect this truth is no deal at all. The room fell silent, and then, slowly, the Ralix inclined their heads. Agreed. We shall adjust our terms. As the negotiations concluded, Elliot let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. That was intense, he whispered as they stepped away from the crowd. The Empress nodded. It is the nature of leadership. To balance strength with wisdom, to see beyond the immediate gain. He studied her, admiration blooming. You know, for an Empress, you're pretty down-to-earth. Well, down to Xylar Prime, anyway. She smiled, a softer expression than he'd seen before. And you, for a human, are quite adaptable. Well, it's either adapt or get stepped on. And I'd rather avoid becoming a human pancake. Her laughter filled the space between them, and for a moment, the weight of alien politics and survival slipped away. As the evening wound down, Elliot found himself back in the gardens, this time with the Empress seated beside him. The stars above shifted slowly, constellations he'd never seen but was beginning to recognize. You know, he said, I think I could get used to this place. Maybe even make a home here. Her fingers intertwined with his, the gesture surprisingly tender. You already have, Elliot. You simply need to claim it. He squeezed her hand, a new sense of purpose settling over him. Then let's see where this adventure takes us. Together. And as the stars of Xylar Prime shone above, Elliot Marks, the scrappy human xenobiologist, finally felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be.